at that emotion.
Around the outside. It's time to bring the action.
Yeah, welcome to SMX Insider. We are your insiders, the Jasons, Wygant, and Thomas here after round 3 of Pro Motocross and the continuation of the SuperMotocross World Championship at Thunder Valley in Lakewood. Same story in Colorado as we had in California, JT, and that is Lawrence brothers on top, Hunter managing it better than his competition, and Jett just being ridiculously dominant, maybe even better here than the others. It's pretty wild how they have just got this management program. It doesn't even look to be in jeopardy. They're so smooth. They're so simple. It looks so easy.
It does look so easy. And for those of you at home, it's not as easy as they make it look. These two are really coming into their own. You want to say they're in their prime, but they're almost too young to really be in their prime yet. So it's been wildly impressive. And I think everybody to a man is trying to figure out, how do we manage these two and how do we beat them?
Yeah, we were teasing going into round 2 and into round 3. Hey, Ferrandis and Webb are coming off injuries. They're going to improve. By the way, Jett Lawrence is a rookie, so he's going to improve as well. And he said that he felt better on the bike this weekend at the first 2, so that's a scary thought. In the 250 class, though, you're thinking the same old Lawrence brothers nemesis is reestablishing himself.
I do, and you look, if you were, kind of drawing a chart of Justin Cooper's season thus far, he really started off on a low note. He had really high expectations, and I think everybody else did as well. And it was a little bit underwhelming. We saw him improve significantly at Hangtown, and then this past weekend at Thunder Valley was really that next step. The first moto, you want to say dominated, but he held a 10-second lead throughout. And then the second moto, he showed an ability to do something that we've always questioned, which is to face some adversity, drop back in the pack, whether that's through a crash or a bad start, and then charge back through. And he was setting some wildly fast lap times along the way too. So not only did I think he made a believer out of many of us, I think he added a little bit of self-confidence there too throughout both motos, the first moto win and the second moto recovery.
All right, yeah, so this is always the thorn in the side of the Lawrence brothers, whether it was Justin Cooper challenging Jett for that 250 title a few years ago or now trying to challenge Hunter for it this year. So that's going to be interesting as this season goes on. And still plenty of other contenders, especially in that class. So we'll get into it in this week's show. 30-second board time. Let's get into hot topics in the sport. The 250 class, it's been the same story all 3 rounds. Someone wins the first moto, and then Hunter Lawrence comes back and wins Moto 2. We'll talk about how well Hunter's managing this series in a moment, but let's talk about those first moto winners. RJ Hampshire round 1, Payne Deegan round 2, Justin Cooper round 3. All these guys have to feel like these races are winnable for me, but then they always have problems. And I understand with a rookie like Deegan, but for Hampshire and Cooper, it's got to be getting a little frustrating.
Yeah, I would assume so. They've all done great things, but to win this championship, you've got to have that entire package put together. You can't have one great moto and then have a really difficult second moto, because you look up at the end of the day and you've lost a bunch of points to the series championship leader, Hunter Lawrence. So I think there's potential there, and I'm sure they're all frustrated. This isn't some sort of, a new development for them, but it's easier said than done. There's so much parity in this 250 class. If everything doesn't go your way, it's really hard to claw back up near the podium.
Oh, clawing is exactly what Hampshire has been doing lately. I want to talk about Hunter, though. Okay, we all see what he's doing on the track, avoiding the big mistakes. But you, with your station down there at the podium, you're seeing off the track, this just flows not just in the races, but how he approaches everything.
Yeah, and I got to watch him a lot last season as well, and I saw him get frustrated at times that he just couldn't beat Jett, and you could see that on his face. He wasn't hiding it, and then you could see the highs when he would win motos. He was so excited about it. This year's been a very different Hunter Lawrence, and I don't know if that's on purpose or it's been a maturity thing that he's turned a corner. Maybe after winning the 250E Supercross Championship, that's just something he's acquired along the way, is this different mindset. And in the first motos, I watched the first moto at Hangtown when he came off the track. He got a 3rd place. I'm sure he wasn't very happy about that, but there was really no frustration. He looked very calm. I think he understood the situation. He needed to get a better start. He had the pace. And then in the second moto, he went out and accomplished that goal. But when he came in from the second moto, it was very similar. The facial expressions were almost identical. And to me, that's a really telling thing for a rider who's only 23 years old, who's still figuring out how to win overalls in this class, and he's, well on his way to maybe earning that first Pro Motocross Championship. But being able to maintain the same even-keeled temperament through the highs and the lows, I think will serve him very well. And that's not the same way these other guys are doing it. The younger guys, when they do well or they do poorly, there's no doubt about which happened in that particular moto. Their face will tell you alone. Not so much with Hunter Lawrence. He just looks like the picture of calm through good motos and bad motos.
Yeah, and we had those 3 different first moto winners. Justin Cooper over the bars in Moto 2 this weekend cost him, and we'll have more on Jo Shimoda. He's been going fast, but doesn't have a moto win yet, a little later in the show. What cost Shimoda and a lot of guys was that huge crash in the first 250 moto, which, by the way, Hunter got beat, banged around, and bumped, but he managed to keep it on 2 wheels. But for a lot of other guys, Shimoda and Hampshire, who would be considered title contenders, that was devastating, and it looks like a few injuries also there.
Yeah, it's a tough deal. And you're hearing guys talking about this new dynamic of the starting grades, right? And it's a part of racing, but it seems like more guys are getting there together. There's a little bit less variance exiting that starting gate, and we're seeing how that's playing out. And I think really all you can do is try to be there first, because if everybody's going to get there at a similar amount, the similar time frame, you want to be ahead of those guys. And what's happening is they're all locking handlebars, and that's where you see the front flips from RJ and Chantimus and these guys, is because they lock handlebars, someone's front brake gets caught and jams in, and then they just do a giant front flip. So it's a little bit tough, but I will say the great part of that, outside of the injuries, is you're seeing these heroic rides from RJ Hampshire and Shimoda and these guys to get anywhere back into the top 5 or even where they can see the podium is incredible. And we saw it in both classes, first turn crashes and heroic rides right after them.
Yep. And the rookies, it's really interesting in this class. You have the more experienced veteran of, say, Hunter Lawrence out front. But, okay, Deegan has been a headliner because he got that moto win, and he's right there in the points. But for Hymas to get the 3rd in the second moto, that was great. Creeping up closer as more of a top 10 guy is Talon Hawkins of the Rockstar Husqvarna teams, and Ryder DeFrancesco doing the same. Don't know about Jet Reynolds. Hopefully he's not too banged up from the first turn crash. But the Deegan, that's a different curve. But I think all 3 of the other rookies can say, like, okay, it's coming together.
Yeah, they're all trying to find their way into this class. And Chance Hymas finally got that breakthrough ride, second moto at Hangtown, and then he followed that up with an improvement here at Thunder Valley. And I think all of them are just, where do I fit in? That's the question they keep asking themselves. Ryder D's been at the front nearly every moto and then has worked his way back a little bit. But you have to think, very similar to what Chance Hymas did, you continue to put yourself in that good position time and time again. It's going to work out in one of these motos. So it's an interesting dynamic. Everybody's progressing at their own pace. And yeah, you like to see the success, and the future looks so bright with so many of these guys starting to put themselves at the front. Of course, Hayden Deegan is leading that charge.
Yep, absolutely. And if you also look at the combined standings here with SMX, when we take the Supercross and Motocross standings together, it gets really interesting. I mean, Deegan is right there near the top. Obviously, Hunter Lawrence is the leader since he's the Motocross points leader and won a Supercross title. But it will be interesting to see if these rookies can get in, such as Ryder DeFrancesco, who didn't race Supercross. Can he get enough points to get in? Those would be 3 more races, A, to make some money, but B, to gain some experience in a Supercross-ish setting, not quite full-on Supercross, but that'd be valuable for them. So we just want to show you these points here so you see how it's turned out when we put all these riders together. We normally do our big interview as a separate part of this show, but we want to slide it right in here. James Stewart, we're calling him Stu Stradamus, with some unbelievable calls early in the day that completely played out during the afternoon. So here's our big interview. We'll bring James Stewart back from Thunder Valley.
Yes, that's right. I'm going to try to get this right. Stu Stradamus. Our big interview this week, we're going to drop in James Stewart here in the middle of our 30-second board with Jason Thomas. So, crazy predictions at the beginning of the day. We'll talk 250 class in a moment, but I got to go right at the top. You were talking about privateer motorcycles on this type of track maybe being better than factory bikes. I've never heard anyone say that in my entire time around this sport. Time Master Bull didn't win, but his bike was darn good.
Yeah, it was. And I saw it today when we first saw it. We saw Derek Drake. That was kind of the first sign. But yeah, you just kind of watched it, and we saw this. Well, I saw this coming in Supercross, with Justin Cooper, Josh Hill, and towards the end of the season when some of these guys, the factory guys, were out and those tracks was breaking down, you just noticed, like, even the Dragons back that Barcia went down to Nashville, I'm looking at Justin Cooper, I'm like, it looks really easy to do. So coming here, it was just like the whole track was set up that way instead of one section. So I'm watching Tire Master Pool and these other guys, and it really seemed like easy for those guys.
Now, what's cool when I get you two in here, James probably always had the best stuff, the stiffest stuff, the full work stuff. That was probably not what you had, JT. So you could talk a little about his theory of the softer bike might be better on this type of track.
Yeah, and I'm going to bring in the Nostradamus part of this.
Oh, nice.
So I was more on the Jett Lawrence is going to win today. That was my big prediction.
Correct.
I didn't have all of this insight
job.
about privateer suspension working so much better, which was brilliant, by the way. We saw that work all day long. But it is a thing, and I know from my own personal preference and what made me feel comfortable is running a really soft setting. And I had other guys that were better than me get on my bike, and they couldn't even ride it because it was so soft, right? They felt like they were going to crash. Every time they got deep in the stroke of the suspension, they felt like they were going to crash. So it's just a personal preference thing, and I think the higher you climb the ladder and the faster you start to go, the stiffer you need your suspension to be. Every little bump, every little rut, it gets transferred up into your body, and the bike's really not absorbing a lot of things. You could notice that. So I think a lot of the chassis engineers are probably going to go back and look at settings this week and say, okay, if we run into this same situation down the line, how can we help alleviate that?
Yeah, but James, you said it's not as simple as, well, why doesn't the Cowboy team or the Honda team or whoever run a privateer type soft setup? You said that's such a big change, you can't really just snap your fingers and do it.
Yeah, what Jason just said is like other guys got on his bike and they couldn't even ride it.
Yeah.
So imagine coming here at the racetrack and trying to make that change. It's not only just, you can't just soften the thing up, because now with the factory suspension, the springs and all the different things in there, like the clamps, all that stuff makes the bike rigid. So it's not even just making the fork softer. One of the things with having a factory bike is once you do start going to that higher speed, you start getting into those gnarly G-outs, those things that the stiffness, when it hurts you here, it saves you in other spots. You know, all the riders, including myself, we fall in love with these bikes because we get to ride a chance to ride the stock motorcycles because it's really comfortable, it's fun. But then you start going out and you start going fast, that thing starts moving. So they're going to have to do a lot to change it. It's not just the suspension.
I think it's going to be really interesting because you're going to have riders asking impossible things of their engineers this week. And I think a guy like Cooper Webb is going to be like, hey, I could barely ride my bike to second moto. I was really struggling. How do we get better from here? So I think that's where and we're going into a track that could shape up very, very similar to this next weekend.
Yeah, for sure.
Yep.
But I think it's important for a guy like Cooper Webb not to fall into that because, yeah, you might be able to race against and it might be more comfortable, but I believe actually Cooper ended up going slower because the reason why Ty Masterpool is comfortable, like he's used to riding that bike reacts a lot of different ways. And then, okay, if he's comfortable doing that pace, it's still a different level at Jett Lawrence, and I think those guys are going to have to pick up a pace to be able to do it. Look, I wanted that. I wanted a bike that moves softly but hold up, but I had to choose, so I just went the opposite way. I went really stiff. JS would have struggled today.
I think we would be remiss without mentioning Jett Lawrence here. He's been so dominant and perfect thus far. So my question to you is, you've been in the spot. You're ripping off moto wins and no one seems to be able to touch you. How do you continue to challenge yourself during the week? Because I think that's going to be very important for Jett to keep developing. You know, Supercross 2024 is not going to be this easy. The situation he's in right now will not be the situation he's in January. How do you go back during the week knowing that you're probably going to win easily next weekend and keep pushing yourself so you maximize your development?
Well, Jett Lawrence is actually in a great spot because his brother is a dominant guy. He's winning a 250 class. So I think that during the week, it's kind of business as usual. The hard part for me when I was in this spot was the weekend, because I already came in knowing I was going to win. This is where I start racing for minutes. You know, I started trying to get a big gap. Even if Chase Sexton comes back, I think he's feeling to a point to where, look, I'm confident. So now until Chase comes back and you get that competition, you're going to start probably seeing that gap go up because now he's going to start racing for a different one, and it's going to be difficult for these other guys.
Yeah, we were maybe had false hope after Hangtown. Like, oh, they're getting closer. He put them right back where they were at round one. But we'll see if we get Sexton back at High Point or soon, or whoever else wants to challenge him. Like you said, JT, it'll be harder next year in Supercross. Maybe even we get Tomac back by then. Who knows? As for you, we know where we can find you. Bubba's World. You have more deep thoughts? Maybe some more predictions?
Yeah, we'll have something. I have to think of something on there.
We took a lot from you today.
Yeah.
We used a lot of thoughts up on this show.
It's all good. It's all good, baby.
All right. Good to have James with us for our big interview. And, hey, as long as you're right, we'll just keep rolling out the Stradamus and we'll just ignore it the next time you don't get it.
I like it. I like it.
Look, I've been around pretty long time here. James saying, I think this is going to be a track where a privateer bike is better than a factory bike. I've never heard that call before. He was on it. It paid off. And not just with Masterpool. Look at some of these other guys. Grant Harlan, if not for Masterpool, we'd be talking about what a great ride he had. He battled with Cian Cerullo. all day, and they weren't too far behind Cooper Webb. And Webb's healthy. Webb was second into the first moto. Unbelievable what these guys are doing, JT.
Yeah, and I love the part about Stu because for years we heard about how much studying he would do off the motorcycle. He would go back and watch these old videos and even stuff like Moto World going back 20 and 30 years ago. And I think this is one of the first times which really played out. He made a call early on based off of things he's seen in the past, analyses he's done in the past, and also putting his race experience into that. And it could not have been more relevant than it was on Saturday at Thunder Valley. So if you're ever wondering if a guy like that knows what he's talking about or if he's just talented at riding a motorcycle, I think that was proof right there.
What do you think when you see all this? That we mentioned the Wildcat Racing team, Lorenzo Locurcio around the top 10, Jose Butron with him at a couple of rounds around the top 10, Harlan in the top 10. It's been, obviously, we know the injuries are there, but now these guys are creeping closer to the guys that aren't injured. So what do you think when you see this?
Well, of course, we know the injury factor is there, right? There's a little bit of a lack of depth in this 450 class right now. But as you mentioned, these guys are gaining confidence. And if you had asked both Grant Harlan, Adam Cincerillo, a mixture of these guys, if they thought they would be battling at any point, even Ty Masterpool, you say, hey, you're going to be giving Aaron Plessinger all he wants, chasing a podium down in the 450 class this season, he would have probably said that's unlikely. But here we are. And I think the more that it happens, the more comfortable they get with racing these guys, the less intimidated they'll be, and the more parity we're going to see. So for the privateers, it's a great development. I'm sure they're loving it. For the factory guys, just like James said on the weekend, they hate this development. They hate every part of it because they want that elite status, that factory level, and that's why they get paid so much money, is to be that level of racer, and they don't want those privateers infringing on any of that. So yes, it is a friendly rivalry, but it's really great to see these two different just classes of racer, and their daily lives are so much different in how they have to go about this. But on race day, hey man, they're battling it out there, and it's we're the benefactors of all of that.
Yeah, I think the factory guys, they respect what those dudes are doing, but they would like it to stop right now. Like, get out of here. Get out of here. KTM did end up, even though Webb had to deal with these guys, including Masterpool, they did end up having a good day on paper when it was all over. They get 2 podiums, and Webb is actually now tied with Chase Sexton at the top of the SMX standings, which we'll get to in a minute. So Webb, he said this has not been his best track. He's still happy to just even be on the podium. Aaron Plessinger might be revealing himself as maybe the second best guy, the guy closest to challenging Jett here. What do you think?
Yeah, and I blew it this weekend on the broadcast. I should have shared the fact that Webb's average moto finish over the course of his career is an 8th. And I don't think most people would know that. It's a little bit shocking to hear that. Yes, at Thunder Valley specifically. Yep. Over the course of 12 motos, his average finish is 8th. And there weren't even outliers. He didn't have DNFs or anything in there that would really skew the data. I think 3 of the motos in particular were actually 8th place. So that speaks to just the lack of performance he's had at this racetrack. And I think if you had told him, hey, your average finish is an 8th here, and you're going to get a podium this weekend, will you take it? I think he would happily take that every day of the week. So if you put it into that context, I think he can walk away with a silver lining and say, hey, at my worst track, I still was 3rd on the day. That's a pretty good way to continue on to the rest of this series. And as for Plessinger, I agree with you. I think he is the second best guy. And you look, and he mentioned it on the podium this weekend, I think he's crashed every moto this year so far. So if he can find a way to reduce some of that crashing, the sky's the limit. And he even made mention that he thinks he has something for Plessinger. I heard or read that somewhere, or I'm sorry, for Jett Lawrence. I don't necessarily know if I believe that, but all that matters is if he believes that. If he thinks he can get up there and race with Jett, that's going to keep him in the fight and continue pushing forward. And we know we need it, right? We want someone to get up there and push Jett and see what he's truly capable of.
Absolutely. Next race we're going to is High Point. Another shout out to the Hall of Fame nominees for the AMA Motorcycle Hall of Fame coming up. Rita Coombs, the Coombs family, founders of that High Point National. The Holber family owns the track, but the Coombs have worked with them. This track's been around almost the earliest days of the Nationals, 1976, I believe. So if you're an AMA lifetime member and you have a chance to vote, it'd be cool to get some of the super motocross type people in there. Travis Pastrana's on the list as well. He's done great things in this sport. Our buddy Grant Langston, Ryan Dungey, Paul Schlegel, who was one of the co-founders of Loretta Lynn. So if you have a vote, use it, because it's all across the board of motorcycling, from Harley types on the road to road racing, flat track, you name it. Always good to get supercross and motocross people in. Now we talk High Point a little bit more in depth. What do you think when we go to that track, which the track has changed a lot through the years in the layout. Do you feel like it's changed the way it races, or is it like different layout, same old challenge?
Well, of course, it changes a little bit, but to me, one of the biggest factors with High Point is the weather. You know, it's early summer. There's a lot of weather that rolls through that part of the country this time of the year. So we're going to see if that's a factor this weekend. It certainly was something we were watching all weekend long at Thunder Valley. And if the weather's perfect, High Point is one of the best tracks of the year. The dirt is really tacky. There's traction. There are a lot of ruts, but yeah, the elevation and just the overall look, feel, and the racing dynamics, I think most people can appreciate that. But hey, if we wake up Saturday morning and it's raining, all bets are off. We've seen some of the most historic mud races in the sport's history at High Point, and there's a reason for that. So I think everybody kind of looks at it with their head cocked a little bit as like, what High Point are we going to get this weekend? But yeah, I think it's one of the most historic racetracks, and for good reason. So let's hope it stays dry.
Yep. Now we can show those SMX points in the 450 class. As I mentioned, we now have a tie at the top. And in the press conference after the race at Thunder Valley, first Cooper Webb was asked about battling Ty Masterpool, and I don't think he was pumped about that topic or that happening. Then he was asked about being tied with Sexton in points, and the smile and the laughter came right back. This is the master plan that Cooper Webb is putting together now, salvaging his season after going out with an injury in Supercross, and now he's on top. That's going to be exciting to watch that, because we think we'll get Sexton back at some point, and he could score some more points too. But the real beneficiaries are all these privateers who are going to get in and are making huge money. Let's go back to Grant Harlan again. I'm going to look this up. Grant Harlan is 16th overall in points. So if he keeps stacking them like this, he's not even going to need the LCQ. He's going to be guaranteed to race, guaranteed to make good money. 22nd overall in points. Pays $25K. That's huge for a guy like Harlan. Heck, Marchbanks just came back this weekend, JT. He's already ranked 36. Give him a few more weeks. He's going to be in the top 30. You think maybe even top 20.
Yeah, this is going to be a moving math equation the entire summer. And what I'll be interested to see is if some of these guys, some of the Supercross mainstays that were qualifying for main events, if they start looking around going, hey, I was planning on taking some more time off this summer, but I'm going to have to get back out there. You know, they're going to start booking hotels for Redbud and Spring Creek, because they're going to look at the situation and say, if I don't go race these pro motocross races, it's going to severely impact my chances at being in those SMX playoffs. And not only that, how much further up the scale they're going to start. So it's a whole new dynamic for the entire sport, and everybody's trying to come to terms with it. We saw how much it affected Cooper Webb's decision this summer, because I believe without the SMX playoffs, I don't think he's racing right now. So it's added a whole new wrinkle to how guys have to approach not only summer, but the entire month of September. So yeah, it's a fluid situation that we're going to have to stay on top of.
Yeah, and then we didn't even know we'd have this kind of injury run, right? So if you're a Supercross only type privateer and you're fighting your way to get into the main events early in the year when all the factory guys are there, and now these motocross specialists are just feasting, getting 8th place finishes for 2 motos in a weekend because all these guys are out, yeah, you might need to change your plan. So we'll see if that happens as the summer goes on. But look, it's all academic to talk about all these other positions. We know the main story coming out of the 450 class. Jett Lawrence now has a 6-moto win streak to begin his 450 career. And honestly, JT, they haven't even been dramatic. It reminds me a lot of when Stewart and Carmichael did this. When they had perfect seasons, we didn't have nail-biter motos. Can they do it? Can they not? Taking the lead with the 2-lap card coming out. No, they just dominated the whole time. That's what he's done.
Yeah, you know, I think it's a little bit closer to the 2008 season with James Stewart. If you remember, you go back, Michael Alessi gave him a run at several motors, specifically even Thunder Valley. He was really close to him, but you always wondered where James Stewart was as far as where the ceiling actually lied. And I view this the same way, where James in that season was doing just enough to win because he was coming off a knee surgery. And I think Jett in a lot of these motos is doing just enough to win too. It just so happens this past weekend at Thunder Valley, his, I think, potential pace was so much higher that he was able to pull a 10, 12, 15-second gap in that second moto. But I think it's going to take an outlier ride from Plessinger, maybe Chase Sexton comes back. One of those guys is going to have their best day and put Jett under duress to truly see what he's capable of. Because right now, I don't think he's having to try so hard. I get to gauge him right when he comes off the track. He's not really sweating so much. He doesn't look like he really had to put too much effort into it. And if you're one of these guys trying to beat him, you have to look over going, man, he doesn't look like that he even was trying. And I'm giving it everything I have. You see the wars that these other guys are going through to get to the front, and Jett's just kind of riding around by himself out there.
Okay, fans, Pro Motocross season is now here. I'm excited about that, but if you know me, I'm more excited about deals and discounts, and I've got one to announce for you. International fans of Supercross and Motocross, the Super Motocross season, are now available for half off the original price on the Super Motocross Video Pass. That's right, 50% discount for all our international fans to watch the Pro Motocross season and the inaugural playoff rounds of the Super Motocross World Championship. So, go to supermotocross.tv to purchase access to the exciting conclusion of this 2023 season. You get all our live races, our weekly show right here, SMX Insider, and over 800 plus hours of archived races. Time for Fowlers Facts. We bring in our staff statistician, Clinton Fowler. Now, in previous episodes, Clinton, we talked about the 4-0 moto streak for Jett Lawrence, which tied Jeff Ward in a rider entering this class and being undefeated for the first time. I joked around with Wardy about it actually this week. A, he didn't know he had the record. B, he knew he was going to lose it because he knew Jett was going to win again, and Jett has now. So he's definitely got the rookie record at 6-0. Let's talk about long moto streaks beyond rookies in general.
You know, Weege, it's surprising how many streaks there are that are pretty long. Just look at last season. Eight moto wins for Eli Tomac in the middle of the season, solidified the championship. I mean, JT, you look at the battles that him and Sexton had last year, an impressive season with an 8 moto win streak.
Yeah, he caught fire there in the middle of the season, and I give Chase Sexton a ton of credit for being able to fight back. You know, he really got back into the fight and took it all the way down the stretch. Now the question is, can anybody do that to Jett Lawrence this year? But to start out 6-0 here and to do it the way he's doing it in dominant fashion, we've only really seen one moto where he was seriously challenged. It's this kid's something else.
It might take Sexton fighting back again if he can get back on the track to end this one. I know we say it's surprising how many streaks there are, but I think everyone knows of a couple, and we're going to get into the data here on the Ricky Carmichael and James Stewart runs of perfect seasons. But with your data, Carmichael's actually have more than a perfect season worth of streak.
Yeah, I think I don't know about you guys, but I'm holding on the perfect season talk. That said, I'm willing to go a little bit further. There's some streaks that are longer than just one season that both RC and James really put down. You look at it, and the one that really sticks out for me, guys, is Ricky Carmichael. You look at this top 10 list. It's a greatest hits of seasons. And Carmichael's on here 3 times. He won 31 in a row, he won 26 in a row, and he won 13 in a row. And the interesting part, guys, that was all between 2002 and 2005. During that period, guys, he won 85 of 94 motos and 45 of 47 overalls. So Jett started, like, don't get me wrong, what Jett's doing is amazing at 6 motos in a row, and to do that as a rookie. But guys, 85 of 94 motos over a 4-year period. Really, really impressive.
That's, okay, we're going 02, 03, 04, 05. He won all but 2 races overall? That's ridiculous.
Yeah, all but 2. And JT, you lived that. You were lining up on the gate with him there. What'd you see firsthand?
I've been living that life against Ricky Carmichael since about 1989. So yeah, it was really never the same, but those years specifically, I can remember outside of a couple battles or, you know, Sebastian Tortelli trying to challenge him here and there, it was a foregone conclusion who was going to win. We never really talked about it. There weren't many discussions like now about going into every Supercross race or Pro Motocross race about, man, the battle at the front, can Eli Tomac do it? Is Chase Sexton going to get that first championship? None of that went on. We all knew that Ricky was going to win. It was the battle for the podiums and all the other storylines. Ricky was the alpha. He was the dominant racer. The stats obviously tell us that, but it's a completely different dynamic. There was no conversation about who was going to beat Ricky. We all knew you just couldn't do it. That's just how life was.
Yep.
And so you look at Ricky at that many race wins. Hey, Weege, Ryan Dungey is on this list. 2010 rookie season, he won 11 in a row. So I guess maybe the first thing we should look at is, can as a rookie can Jett meet the 11 in a row?
Yeah, because obviously it is a little early to probably start talking perfect season, but it just gives you a context of what 6-0 is like. And how much dominance we've seen in this series before. But I do want to talk about the Dungey year, because here's what's also similar about 2010 with Dungey and Jett Lawrence now. The beginning of the 2010 season, Stewart and Chad Reed are the biggest stars in the sport. Ryan Villopoto's on the rise. All three of those guys didn't race outdoors, mostly due to injury. And Stu's team was a Supercross-only team. They tried to jump back in for motocross. They weren't ready. So that's what's a little similar here. No Sexton, no Tomac. I'm not saying that Jett wasn't going to win against them anyway. I'm not willing to say that Jett couldn't beat anyone, including Tomac and Sexton right now. But it's the same thing with Dunge. We didn't even know. Dunge had to race who was there, and that's what Jett has to do. So, yeah, it is interesting to compare and contrast to Dunge's rookie season, as you can see with the win streak. 11 in a row. Let's see if Jett can get there. Clinton, you had one other rider you want to talk about in the 250 class.
Yeah, Jo Shimoda, guys. That first moto, absolutely amazing first moto. Down in the first turn, crosses the start line in 30th position. By the fourth lap, he's in 6th position. So he makes up 24 positions in 4 laps. And maybe that is impressive in and of itself. But then he goes and sets the fastest lap on laps 12, 13, and 14. So at the end of the race, he just has this incredible speed. And not just a little bit better. He's nearly a second faster in the 12th lap. He's almost 2 seconds faster in the 13th lap, and just over a second faster in the 14th lap. So just absolutely incredible. So JT, I look at that elevation after passing that many guys. That's impossible. That's a really hard thing to do.
Yeah, he was wildly impressive. I got to speak to his rider coach, Nick Way, right after that moto. And even Nick was impressed at how strong he was in the late laps of Moto 1. And that's really what they've been looking for. They came into this series after a great 2022 campaign thinking they were going to be championship contenders. And through just crashes and bad starts and all sorts of different things, that hasn't really played out. So I think this was a breakthrough ride. I think there's data there that they can go back and look at and say, hey, you're there. You need to clean up a few things, stay off the ground, but you can win. Your pace is there. So we'll see what he does with that. But I think it was a really nice little bit of light at the end of the tunnel, if you will, for Jo Shimoda's 2023 season.
Real quick, JT, after a charge like that, I think you had the same thing, Clinton, right? You're wondering about Moto 2 after a charge like that, Clinton?
Yeah, yep.
Yeah,
Moto 2, like, he just didn't quite have the same speed.
Yeah, and it's tough to replicate where you just pass everybody and you're setting the fastest lap times along the way. There's so much adrenaline involved in that, and you wonder if he just ran out a little bit of that extra gas late in the second moto. But then he got into that battle with Justin Cooper, and Justin Cooper's closing down the gap, and he turns the fastest lap of the race with 2 laps to go. So I think it was there. But again, this is what Jo has done all season. And for all of the good things he did on Saturday, he still made that critical mistake with 2 laps to go. So there's a lot to work with. There's a lot of silver lining there and a lot of positives. But to ever be the consistent guy that he wants to be and go challenge Hunter Lawrence for a championship, he's going to have to find a way to weed out some of those late race mistakes too.
Okay, that's it for now, but I know you're hard at work, getting into Fowler's film room, ready with some stuff for Race Day Live, which we'll have 10 a.m. on Saturday.
Yep, Weege, working on some Jett analysis and what his true potential is for this season.
I don't know if there's a chart. It might be off the chart. I don't know if you can actually quantify that. It's pretty wild. But anyway, thanks for the help, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks, Weege.
And now it looks like we're going to have a lot more numbers to crunch next week, because Ken Roczen is now expected to make a surprise appearance at High Point, his first Pro Motocross race of the year, and the first one he's ever done with this Suzuki team. And also interesting, it should improve his ranking when we combine these Supercross and Motocross standings together for the SMX playoffs at the end of the year. So it'll be really fun to have Kenny back, and also really interesting to see how he does this weekend at High Point.
Time to wrap this show up. We are headed to High Point. You can watch everything on Peacock all weekend, starting with Race Day Live, presented by motorsport.com. That's 10 a.m. Eastern, and then the motos start at 1 p.m. It's all on Saturday. Be good to have Ricky Carmichael join us this weekend, get his thoughts on the first couple rounds. JT, how similar do you think Thunder Valley and High Point are? We really saw Thunder Valley, the track, play a role as a character. I almost feel like High Point's similar in a way. What do you think?
Normally, I would say they're not, but the conditions this year at Thunder Valley changed that. So you're going to see a lot of the long ruts and where guys have to really think about what they're going to do. I think it's a little bit of a slower racetrack because of that. So there will be some similarities here in 2023, but that's normally not the case.
Well, it's going to be similar on any track if you got Jett Lawrence racing, because it didn't matter when it was hard and dry at one or went deep at the other. We'll see if that win streak can continue. For the other Jason, I'm Jason. We'll see you this weekend. Thanks for watching.